Hey everybody, welcome to this special Dremio workshop. We're going to be talking about how to build an iceberg lakehouse. Now, just a couple little housekeeping. Generally, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, keep them in the Q&A box or in the chat. I'll be monitoring both as the presentation goes on. And then, any remaining questions we'll answer at the end of the workshop. Now, as the workshop goes on, directions will be given to you through the chat. And just so that way we know if you've completed them, just leave an emoji on those directions in the chat, so that way we know that you're with us. But with no further ado, okay, I'm going to pass you off to product manager Isha Sharma to walk you through building an iceberg data lakehouse.
Thanks, Alex. Welcome everybody to the special edition of Build an Iceberg Lakehouse with Alex and Isha. Before we get into it, I'd love to give you guys a quick overview of the agenda. We'll talk about Apache Iceberg, although I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it already, what it is and why it is. That'll be real quick. And then we'll get on to the hands-on aspect of this workshop on how you can quickly get to an iceberg table with Dremio, and how you accelerate your queries and workloads, and how you pretty much close out building out that data product. After those hands-on exercises, I'll give you a quick overview of something called Dremio Arctic and how you can manage your data as code with Arctic. And we'll do a quick wrap up with questions, and that's it. So let's get down to it. All right, so Apache Iceberg, terms everywhere. Everybody knows about it, right? It's been created by Netflix and Apple. Everybody's really engaging with this community and starting to take a lot more interest in Iceberg and implement it, right? And so Dremio's not behind at all. We're right there with you. And the great thing about Iceberg is that it gives you those capabilities that you have on the data warehouse on your lakehouse. So you're keeping your data in a very open format. You have access to all the engines that you would possibly want to use for your different use cases, whether that be Dremiosonar, Flink, Spark, anything else. And on top of that, you're able to do your DML right there on the spot. And Iceberg gives you the ability to, again, have that open data format and have your single source of truth, right? Your data is sitting in a single location, and when you do an insert or update on it, everybody sees the same thing at the same time. And last but not least, time traveling and rolling back, being able to query different versions of data sets that existed before, and going back to something if you've got to recover from some sort of a mistake. So without further ado, let's get to the hands-on part of this. All right, so to help you guys out, I'm going to drop a gist into the chat, and you guys I'll be also dropping the SQL commands as we go into the chat as well, and that's where we'll launch your thumbs up emoji. So the prereqs for this workshop were to have a DremioCloud organization and account that's already set up. So go ahead and sign into that and give me a thumbs up when you've done that. If you've got an account, you should be able to log into it there. If you haven't, feel free to sign up for DremioCloud, or you can just watch along as we do this throughout the workshop. All right, so once you've logged in, you get to your organization screen for Dremio. Arctic, which I mentioned before, we'll come back to that in a second, but let's click into your Sonar project. And again, click into your first project that you've created. All right, so the first thing that we'll be doing here, so when you're working with Iceberg, you still need a place, a catalog to store your tables and your metadata. So what we'll be doing is configuring an S3 bucket that I'll provide you, where we'll be creating that Apache Iceberg table and doing our copy intos and all of that. So, or to add a source, let's click this Add Source button down in the left-hand corner. We're going to select Amazon S3. We're going to call this S3, rightfully so. And for the authentication method, we'll do data source credentials and an access key. All right, so let me drop you guys those credentials. So you want to take what I just dropped into the chat and add that in as your access key ID. And this second fantastic ID here will be your secret access key. Okay, pretty standard way of authenticating to an S3 source along with IAM roles, but today we're using an access key. So when you've got that down, hit the save button, and you'll see that source appear in the left-hand side as S3 under object storage. For many of you, it might be the only source there. And you'll see these 3 folders pop up in there. We're going to be working in the Dremio Lakehouse folder, right? And you'll see this nyctaxitrips.csv, which is a file. It's your standard 1 million row data set. We're not going to do anything to register that into Dremio or to format that into Dremio yet. So we'll leave this as is. But here comes the real part of this workshop. So navigate to your SQL runner for me by clicking on the SQL runner, the second button from the top in the left navigation. All right. So what I've done here is created a script that's very similar to the one that you guys have on GitHub. So that'll be a lot easier to follow along with. All right. And the first thing we're actually going to do is, again, like I said, we've added S3 here. So it'll appear on the side. There we go. There's my S3 bucket. And if you try to expand it, there's nothing in there yet because we haven't put anything in it. So here we go. The first thing that we're going to want to do is create our iceberg table. And then the second step here is going to be to copy our data into that table. All right, so let's do it. Let's create this table. The different columns are pretty much a copy of what the CSV file holds, right? So we're going to copy the CSV file that I just showed you guys into this table. So the schema of this table is mimicking the CSV files, right? So here's that SQL command for you all. And what you guys are going to want to do is, instead of nyctrips-isha, that's me, you'll want to change that last part of the name to something, closer to you, so that we're all when we're creating all these tables in the same bucket, in the same folder, you'll be able to differentiate between mine and yours. Okay. So switch on that isha up to your name or your initials, and then go ahead and run this create table command. And then give me a thumbs up when you're ready there. All right. And just to verify that, I'm able to see NYC trips isha in my left-hand panel under the S3 bucket in the Dremio Lakehouse folder, and you should be able to see your table as well. Cool. Next thing, the exciting part, right? So we've created this Apache Iceberg table. Now the data that we're going to copy that CSV data into that table. So simple thing again, make sure you're referencing your table, not mine, but here's the command to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. And so this copy will take a second. We're copying over 1 million rows. And while that's happening, I just wanted to, with copy into, you're specifying the location that you are getting the data from, the file that you're getting the data from. And you can do the same thing with an entire directory, right? Multiple files as well. And you can specify things like the delimiter and all of that, very specific things to what you're trying to copy into your table. The other thing to note here is we took the approach of creating a table and then doing a copy into. This works really well when your data set isn't registered or formatted in Dremio. And what I mean by that is the little purple icon doesn't exist, right? It's not a table that is necessarily recognized or queryable in Dremio. And that's perfectly fine, right? You don't have to register data sets in Dremio to do your migration to Iceberg. The second way to do this, though, is to be able to do a create table as, so CTAS on a table that's existing in Dremio already. And that's a really simple way to do the, to create an Iceberg table as well. So now that the copy into is done, you can see that the results returned 1 million. And that's exactly what I expected. The CSV had 1 million rows in it. Keep that number in mind for when we do the insert. We'll have that hopefully number go up by 1, right? Because we'll be inserting 1 row. But, you know, for those who are paranoid, let's just, if you'd like, go ahead and run a count on your table. You're going to get that million, right? Good. I tend to be paranoid like that, so I like to double check things. But so there you have it. In less than a few minutes, you've created an Iceberg table, you've copied data into it, and you've already started your journey towards an Iceberg lakehouse. Most importantly, though, on a lakehouse is being able to get performance, right? From your workloads, whether that be in our SQL runner, whether that be from one of your client tools, your reports, your dashboards, all of that, that's super important. And the larger the data set is, the slower the performance gets sometimes. So on that note, let's talk about data reflections. So Dremio has data reflections, which optimize and organize your data close to Dremiosonar engine. And we use methods such as, you know, compaction and partitioning and things like that. And so what we're going to do is create a reflection on the table that you all just created in the S3 bucket. And then we're going to run a query, typically a query that has a group by and is trying to do an aggregation. That's the type of query that a dashboard or a report tend to generate. So we will create a reflection and then we'll go ahead and test that reflection. All right, so I'm giving you the way to create a reflection using SQL. This entire operation can be done through the Dremio UI itself as well, right? So there's a few different ways to do this, but we'll stick to SQL since we're already on that route. All right, so here's your command to create a reflection, and you'll notice that it's an alter table. Reflections are on tables, which is why we're altering the table to create a reflection on top of it. So I'm going to run that. And all right, so our reflection is starting to create. It usually takes a few seconds. And while that's happening, I'm going to take you guys over to the jobs page. Feel free to follow along. The jobs page is the third icon from the left right here. And we'll go ahead and open that in a new tab. And that's the history of all of your jobs. And so if you're looking at all the types of jobs that have run across this, mine is a little overwhelming. I've been in this project for a while, but you'll see that these top 2 jobs that have been run, it's to refresh that reflection that we've created. So basically creating that reflection for the first time, right? And those both seem to be done. So we can move on to the next step. Everybody with me so far? So with that reflection in place, we're going to go ahead and now test that reflection, right? So here's the SQL command for that, for everybody that's following along. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And you'll notice, like I said before, we created an aggregate reflection as the SQL command previously suggests. And this particular SQL query is looking across the months. Every month you want to see what the passenger count is, right? So in a dashboard, you would see probably a bar graph, a line graph that comes out of this. Here, you'll see 4 neat little rows that come here, summing up all of the passenger count for the months across the board. And notice that came back pretty quickly. That came back before I even started talking about aggregate reflections in less than a second or in a second. And so that's the power of reflections, is being able to optimize in such a way and knowing where you're going to do your aggregations and all of that, so that when you're repeatedly querying and generating the same workloads, the results that are returned to you come back very, very quickly. More so powerful because you did this at the click of a button or two. This impact shows up again in your ad hoc queries, most importantly in your dashboard and reporting. So one reflection is going to cover all of that. There's no more that you would have to do to optimize these workloads on this particular table. And now for the next exciting part of this workshop, we want to run through what we were talking about before, right? Iceberg bringing you the capability of doing DML on your Lakehouse. No copies. You don't have to put it in any sort of a proprietary format. And it's a single source where everybody is seeing the exact same data. So once you do the insert, it's going to be propagated to all your dashboards, everybody using it in an application, all of that. Right. So let's go ahead and do this update. And notice I picked yesterday's date a few years ago, right? So that's just so that we can identify that insert after the insert is done. So here we go. All right. So this insert will take a second, but as this insert completes, we're going to move on real quick and we'll verify that insert or the update actually happened, right? Again, trust but verify. And so let's go on to do that. And so what this query is going to return is the row that we just inserted. Cool. And there it is, right? And now if I were to give you access to my exact table, or if you already had access to my table, you would see this insert nearly instantaneously. And so that's the majority of building your Lakehouse, creating Iceberg tables, being able to do DML on it, and all of that being performant at the end of the day for your end users. Now, the last bit of this, since we've got a little extra time, is putting a nice little bow on this for your end users. And you'll find these instructions in the gist I sent you. So navigating back to our datasets page, our datasets view where we added our source, that's the first icon on the left nav, right? Let's find that table, the Iceberg table that you all just created. Okay, there's mine. I see your guys's as well. And what we're going to do here is go into this particular table. You'll click the go to table that shows up on the right when you hover on your table. Right. And you'll notice, I'll work backwards a little bit. You'll notice that there's a reflections tab. Here's actually the reflection that you created using SQL. When I said you could do it from the UI, this is where you would have come to do that, right? And it gives you a little more of a visual representation of your dimensions and measures, as well as the fact that it is ready to accelerate and the footprint that it's taking up. From a lineage perspective, you can see, and your users can see as well, where this data came from. Usually, you're probably creating tables out of multiple sources, multiple different tables. And as you build on top of this table, your views will show that. And so your users have access and know where their data comes from. And as I was saying, to put a pretty little bow on the table we've created for your end users, so that they can discover, identify, and understand this data set, we'll add a wiki and we'll add a label to this. So let me drop you a wiki, right? Some data, some content for your wiki. There's all that. You guys can use as much or as little as you want of this. And for me, I'm going to click this edit wiki, paste all of that fun stuff in there. let's add a label to workshop dataset. All right, you'd want to add something that's more informative to your users, right? Maybe that this is a public data set that wasn't generated in-house, but it came from elsewhere, right? Anything that would help your users identify your data set. And so what this has helped us do now is, if you go back to your datasets page again and locate your table, your users that have access to this table get all sorts of information immediately without having to query the table. Querying the table is easy too, but they would be able to understand just by looking at this wiki what the columns are, what this table is about, how to get started with this, how to query it, who to contact, right? You can put all of that information in your wiki, as well as get a little insight using the labels that you've put on there in terms of what kind of usage, what kind of data is on it. And last but not least, the reflection that we've created, that's showing up here as well with the little lightning bolt. The little lightning bolt in Dremio signifies a reflection. So when you see a reflection on a table, that means there's a reflection created on that table. If you go to your jobs page and look at your jobs, you'll also see that the query that we ran earlier, it has a little lightning bolt as well, meaning that it was accelerated using the reflection that we created. All right, so now that we've done that, we've essentially created this table and made it accessible to users so that they can quickly get started and understand that. And all of this, all of the accessibility, the speed, the updates and the DML, all of that is done on your Lakehouse, right? So there's your hands-on part of this workshop. And quickly, I want to go over Dremio Arctic. So Dremio Arctic is a new service that we've introduced to Dremio, and it's our modern and open meta store. It's a catalog, right, that you can use with Dremio, but it brings all of the benefits of Iceberg and more, with the addition of projectnessie and bringing that together with Iceberg. You get even more benefits than you did with Iceberg, right? So you still get your openness to work with any engine. You still get the ability to do DMLs and all of that directly on the Lakehouse. But on top of that, there's a built-in optimization service that does your compactions and your partitioning and your garbage collection all there on the spot. And you can schedule and automate that as well. But the super exciting part of all of this is this concept of managing your data as code, right? Being able to use branches like you would in GitHub to isolate experiments or updates, to be able to do version control and look back at your data from 2 weeks ago or changes that you made 2 weeks ago, and to be able to go back if you need to, right? Be able to recover from something that shouldn't have happened or shouldn't have ended up in your prod environment. And governance, all built in. So role-based access control and being able to monitor all the changes that are being made on your data through commits, just like you can with GitHub. So that's the beauty of Arctic. And well, can't let you go without a bit of a demo for Arctic. So going back into the same project that I had previously, I've skipped ahead a little bit. I created myself an Arctic catalog right there and a small table. It's about 10 rows. And it's the same data set that we were working with previously, the NYC taxi data set, right? So the concept of an Arctic catalog, there's also branches on top of that, right? So this indicator that you see of main, that's our main branch. Also, you could call it your production branch. That's what all of your dashboards, your queries, anything on the day-to-day is actually running on. That's your most dependable branch, right? And you want to keep it clean, consistent, and always running and always functional. What you have the ability to do with Arctic, though, is create additional branches off of main. So what I've done is already created a branch called workshop. And that's what I'm going to be working off of to show you the power of Arctic. So I'm going to do a quick select count on the tiny table I've created. And you'll see that, so I mentioned on main, it's 10 rows. You're going to see 10 rows on this workshop branch as well. And what indicates, see, we've got the 10 there, awesome. So what indicates that I just queried the workshop branch is this syntax of @ref workshop. That's how easy it is to query a different branch. Okay, just by specifying the name of that branch. Now I'm going to say, I'm going to do a similar insert to what we did earlier. Okay, I'm going to do this on my workshop branch. The point of this is I don't want to interrupt. I'm just testing here. I think I need to do this insert. I don't want to disrupt anybody's data, anybody's dashboards that are running off of main or production. So I'm doing all of this in my workshop branch. All right, so I'm going to run that. And of course, like before, the insert takes about a second, but now that's done as well. And as we did before, we're gonna verify that that update actually happened. I'm gonna verify that on my workshop branch, right? That's where the change should have been made. So let's do that. And you come back with 11. Remember, previously it was 10. So that update actually happened on workshop. And guess what? Main didn't get impacted. So all the tests and all the playing around and all of the, even if you brought in another source and started joining things together, nobody would have seen that on main, because check it out. On main, the row count is still 10. None of the changes I've made are impacting main right now. But if you're satisfied with your changes, it's super easy to pull them back to main as well. So I inserted one row. I'm pretty thrilled about it. And I'm ready to show everybody else that I inserted that one row and it can go to their dashboards. So all you have to do to make that happen is merge the changes on your workshop branch back into main, right? Back into your production branch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then naturally, to verify, we should be, if I now query main, which is what I'm going to do with this last query here, we should be able to see that the same changes I made on the workshop branch are now in main. So the row count should now be 11. And it is. So that's the power of Arctic, bringing all of the benefits of Iceberg along with being able to provide you with version control and isolation of when you do experiments, or when your users do experiments or make changes. You're able to do all of that without impacting your production workloads. And when you're ready to actually, make all of that into all your changes into production, it's super easy to get them there as well. So this minimizes the need to have several different environments running and creating sandboxes or data labs for all of your users, so that they're not impacting anything that's mission critical. All right, so that's it. There you have it. So in terms of wrap up, y'all were able to create an iceberg table in pretty much less than a minute, right? There was a lot of me talking going on, but you guys actually did that pretty quickly. Both creating the table and actually inserting data into that table and having it ready to go. On top of that, you were able to create an aggregate reflection, which accelerated your workloads and your queries. And all of that was pretty much done in a single SQL command. And if you'd use the UI in a single click. And lastly, we updated your data on the Lakehouse again. So you're getting performance, you're getting the ability to do DML and so much more directly on your Lakehouse without having to put your data in a closed format or making copies or moving it around or any of that, right? So there you have it. That's how you get to building your Iceberg Lakehouse in actually less than an hour. All right, Alex, what do we got going on?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to make sure to remind everyone that, again, thank you all for attending the workshop. We have a question. In the production environment, you have an ETL process running. In this case, the main branch will always be out of date, right?
Okay, I get what you're saying. Sure. But what you're trying to do is create make changes to your particular table that might not be done by that ETL branch. So times there will be out, will be out of date, but we'll be working on something to keep that a little less out of date. So upcoming, keep following us to see how we tackle that problem.
Okay, and again, we got lots of cool things cooking up here at Dremio, so do keep an eye out for basically a steady flow of feature releases and stuff like that. Yeah, anything else we should mention before we call it a day?
I don't think so. I think we covered it.
Awesome. Okay, thanks everybody for joining in, and with that, I will see you all next time. Make sure you listen to Gnarly Data Waves if you haven't subscribed on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And we'll see you all around. Thank you very much.